without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Reinbott again. We're going to talk about connecting soil health and human health with crop management.
All right. I got it.
Yep. Got the remote?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. All right. Thanks. This is probably my favorite subject. It really is. And I'll be looking forward to this all today and yesterday. And uh-oh, it doesn't move. Think the battery died or something.
Well, it might have been turned off. Let's see.
Oh, okay. There we go. All right. Well, as I mentioned, I was working with some of Dr. Albrecht stuff, but he came actually to Missouri in 1916, and he was a soil microbiologist. And what's really neat is this is the dawn of soil microbiology. They had just figured out, in the 1880s, 1890s, that different legumes required a different bacteria species. So we were really on the dawn of this. And that was discovered in Germany. It takes 20 or 30 years to get over to the United States, and people started incorporating it. So Missouri hired this kind of a new field, soil microbiology. That's really what he was hired to do. But what I want to talk about is how he started taking everything from what other folks were doing and applied it to soil microbiology. And that's what was really, really interesting on this. I've stood the exact same spot. That's at Sanborn Field. Exact, because you can figure out from where you are with everything where you're at. And I think I cross my arms like this, and he crosses his like this. So I actually crossed my arms like him. That's kind of humbling to be in the same spot as someone like him. But he also taught classes. And if you've ever had to teach a class, you'll know you learn more than the students, because you've got to pull all these things together and then explain it. And that's what he did. He went out, he taught a lot of the classes, those basic soils classes, and the rest of them. So he really got to start pulling all these principles together. And first of all, how it went back to soil microorganisms. And he did a lot of his work here at Sanborn Field. This was established in 1888. It's still going today. I'm the director of it. What I do in my spare time, like last night, night before last, I got mounds of data that I'm working on. But it's the third oldest continuous research center in the world. And I'll actually show you some data from that today. But Dr. Albrecht cut a lot of his teeth, did a lot of his work on this. Now, one of the differences you all might find is that in where I'm at, we do a lot of reduced tillage and no-till. I know you all heavy till. Sanborn Field is still heavy tilled. So a lot of the principles I talk about from Sanborn Field are under heavy tillage. So it doesn't have to be only under no-till or reduced tillage. We see these same principles hold up. And as a funny note, this is Dean Sanborn, as named it after. He started this in 1888. He got fired in 1889. In 1923, they named it after him. So he doesn't look very happy, does he? Probably didn't want to even come there. But one of the things that's really neat about Sanborn Field, and it's connected to Dr. Albrecht, he was a director at one time. And there was a big race on for antibiotics. They figured they could be in the soil. So there was it's like kind of like the moon race. These different companies were trying to find the next antibiotic. They found penicillin in the 20s, in the early 40s, during World War II is when they started using it. And it was good for about 40% of all the infectious diseases. Streptomycin came out in 43. It was good for about 40% of the diseases, but all had to be injected. Dr. Albrecht worked with a colleague from Letterly Labs, and they isolated aureomycin out of a plot at Sanborn Field, and that became tetracyclines that we still use today. And they were good on 90% of infectious disease, and they were taken orally. So that got published 75 years ago. So that's really neat. And this is such a big deal that this got put in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. That's how important that was. And Dr. Albrecht is tied back to that. So, but he was also here at a special time with his colleagues. He had some of the greatest minds in soils were there at the same time that he was. One of them is Hans Jenny. If you look at the Hall of Fame of soil scientists, Dr. Albrecht's in that, but so is Hans Jenny. He might actually be right ahead of Dr. Albrecht. He left Missouri and went to UC Davis and did some fantastic stuff. He's the father of soil chemistry. So and this is some data that he had from Missouri. It's just basics that showed that once you break the prairie, you start losing your soil qualities. And one of the big ones is water availability. And that's what you really start suffering on. And they were close. And they actually, you look at some of the memoirs, they argued a lot with each other. Didn't always see eye to eye on things. Jenny was very conservative on putting his neck out where Albrecht wasn't. But they realized that there's some issues here in our soils that we need to address. A couple of students of Albrecht were Bradfield and Baver. Bradfield went on to Cornell and Baver went on to NC State. But while at Missouri, they did some great work in clays. You know, I showed you how calcium is a better flocculator than magnesium, than potassium. Bradfield did that in the 1920s. Baver came up with some of the basic soil fertility that Albrecht started using in his research later on. So he was influenced by these guys, and that's really neat to be open-minded to hear what other people are doing and start putting it all together. And that's what makes it really fun to me, is putting things all together. And that's what he was doing. Again, this is with these houses here, you can get exactly where that was. So that's him standing out there in the 1920s, I believe. Yes. So here's some data that he published after the 50th anniversary of Sanborn Field. And what he did, he was measuring nitrate reductase. They couldn't measure a lot of the things that we can today, the bacteria, the fungi. He couldn't get these numbers like what we can today. But he could measure the enzyme, the activity. He knew what was going on. He was surprised, though. He said, well, we had put manures on all these years. He was expecting the nitrate reductase activity to be much higher than what it was. Where we had Timothy, there's a little bit of a misprint there. That's actually Timothy plots. Where he had Timothy plots, it also wasn't where he thought it should be, even though it was a continuous, cool season crop forever. So he took that soil and he added more inputs to it. He added either lime to it, or added some more organic matter to it, or added phosphorus to it, and measured the nitrate reductase activity, and it went up. So from this, he concluded then that microorganisms were dependent upon nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium. I think we heard that yesterday from Paul. So he concluded these are very, very important for our microorganisms. And that started basing it, a lot of what his fertility started basing on this. The other thing that I probably, more than anything, he is also the grandfather of soil health. As we'll see in a minute, he was thinking about this in the 1930s and 40s, long before the rest of us even thought about what soil health was. We also understood the importance of organic matter. Organic matter is incredibly important. And if you ever have a chance, you can buy these online for about $15, hitting the $15. In 1938, in the USDA annual yearbook, one of the best ones they ever had, it was all, on soils. He wrote a chapter on organic matter. It's still a classic article on organic matter. Do you have that, Paul?
I literally have that book with the tab on that.
Yes, isn't that fantastic?
Oh, yeah.
It is great. But look what it's just great. But here's what unearned increment. The great wealth produced of the past should be recognized as largely responsible for the mining of soil fertility and the burning of organic matter. It means we have made our fortune on the fertility of the past and the organic matter that was stored there. This is 1938, a long time ago. He's warning us we have lost our fertility and organic matter. Organic matter has reached such a low level that the source of this wealth has an extremely uncertain outlook in the future. The heritage of soil fertility and organic matter that we are handing to the next generation is not enough to be used lavishly. We're wasting our resource, and careful conservation and thrifty management will be imperative if it is to yield even a moderate income. He was really concerned in 1938 about what we're doing to our soils. But not everybody agreed. As a matter of fact, Charles Kellogg, who's, my God, he's well respected out there. He thought he was a quack. He thought Albrecht was a quack. He came to the University of Missouri to give a talk, but Albrecht he was out in Europe on a sabbatical. So he said this. Charles Kellogg gave a well-attended talk at the visit and noted in his diary, Albrecht has been fiercely writing a great deal of nonsense about the direct effect of liming on soil fertility. Oh, is that nonsense? It is?
No, I'm just laughing at the concept. I honestly consider lime on acid soil just right behind nitrogen is important.
Right.
One of the most important of all factors.
But how could he write that? And then he said, M.F. Miller, whom everyone respected and others at the university, let this quack stay on as the head of the department. He said, how does the dean let him stay on when he's promoting this nonsense of liming and organic matter? That is, this is like the 1940s. We're into the future now. Oh, but remember, better fertility increases organic matter. Think about that. You have better fertility, you get better root growth, you get better shoot growth, and what happens to organic matter? It goes up. That's our dividend that we're getting. As Paul and I had this conversation yesterday up here, I don't think our legumes fix as much nitrogen as we give them credit for. They're mining it from the organic matter from previous crops. So that is, our crops are utilizing this. But also, manganese is important for organic matter. Paul talked about all the different in the soil, but it is incredibly important for organic matter decomposition and stabilization. So we got to have proper manganese in our soil, not just in our plants. And of course, organic matter is involved in all parts of our soil health. Our chemistry, our biology, our physical properties, it's all a big part of that we'll talk about as we go on through this. And of course, we know it comes from our plants, it comes from our animals and our manures. You got a question? Oh. Uh-oh. Okay, we appreciate that. When right now? All right, you about to see me jump when they put that on there. But, we talked about manures earlier. Manures have a lot of good nutrients. Are they complete? Not always. But do they bring some things that you get as a bonus? Yeah, we really do. As I told you, at Sanborn Field, the only plots that don't show sulfur deficiency are manure plots. And we did the micronutrients on it, and many of those in the manures are much better. But let's talk about our organic matter just for a second. Is it all the same? Is all organic matter the same? It isn't really. When we think of organic matter, we kind of put it all together as one. But a big part of our organic matter is our passive. It's kind of like those potassiums and calciums are in the lattice of the clays. We got organic matter that's pretty stable. It's not going anywhere except through erosion. It's not going to be broken down for the microorganisms to use. It's fairly stable, gives us a lot of our good structure is what it does. So we got that, and I think there on Sanborn Field, they found out that's 2,000 years old, some of that. That came from the tall grass prairies from a couple of millennia ago. Then you've got the other slower released organic matter. You know, it's all going back and forth, just like we've shown before. And it's very slow. It's getting stable. A little bit of it's used by the organisms, but not much of it. But what's really used by our soil microorganisms is that active carbon, that fresh carbon. That's what's really been used by our soil microorganisms for their food. And we can measure that, and we'll show you some of that here in a little bit, where we talk about active carbon. This is the carbon that's really making the difference with our soil microorganisms. So, what is a healthy soil? That's a question. There we go.
Back in the prairie days, was there bison?
In the prairie days, was there bison in Missouri?
Yes, yes. The town I live near, some of the housing districts are in buffalo wallers. So yes. So yes, we did. Yes, we did. So what is a healthy soil? Well, think about what Hans Jenny talked about. How soon as you broke the prairie, our soil started to decay. This morning, I looked for a slide I had of my mother-in-law and her daughters, her 6 daughters, because before I even started thinking about soil health intensely, she kind of made a comment one time. She said, you know, my first garden was my best garden. She had the same garden spot for 56 years. So think about her first house was after World War II. They plowed up a spot for the garden, and that was her first garden. Think about what Hans Jenny's showing right here. Her soil quality started going down after that first time, because yeah, they added manures to it from time to time, and maybe even some fertilizers, but they still couldn't keep up with the slow degradation of her soil. That stuck in my mind, how that observation, her very first was the best. Now here's our soil. You want to take a look at it? Here it is. This is what it looks like under native warm season grasses. You can see we have an abrupt clay pan about right here, but our grasses get through it pretty good, and we find carbon down here and such. 20 feet away from this is where we have a field that's been tilled every year. This is what this looks like. We've mixed the subsoil up with the top, and so you might think, well, is this as good as this? No. Will it produce? Not really, but without the right inputs, without the right nutrients, it's not going to produce much better, because you still, even though it looks better, it's got better structure to it, you still have to have the chemistry part of it. It has to be there. Biologically, yeah, it's better in this top than it is here. Again, and like I said, a lot of things I talk about is also going to be under tillage as well as no-till. So I like looking at it like this. Here's our soil health. It's our chemistry, and you can see the pH and phosphorus and micronutrients and calcium, our biology. And with the biology, it's just not our microorganisms. It's those things that come with it, like organic matter and mineralizable nitrogen. Paul talked a little bit about that. And our enzymes that tell us how much biology there is out there, but our physical properties, our bulk densities, our aggregate stabilities, that's all those things coming together. But I drew these arrows on it because it goes this way, it goes this way. You improve your biology, you can improve your chemistry. You're going to make more phosphorus and sulfur available. You start doing that, you're going to improve your biology even more, but then you're also going to start improving your physical properties of it. You start building your biology and your chemistry, got good chemistry, you get better physical properties. You get better physical properties, it's going to affect everything else. So it all goes back and forth with one another. Just one will affect the other ones. But if you destroy, you don't have good chemistry, the other ones will suffer too. So it's all that in balance. It's very, very important. And when you think about biology, you think of all the microscopic organisms, the bacteria, the fungi, also a little bit bigger ones. You got the nematodes, you've got your protozoas. Probably the first time I ever heard about really getting into soil health, modern soil health, Jill Clapperton. She's from Montana, I think, wasn't she? I think she was at the time. She had us she wanted 5 pits of different management. And that, that soil I showed you with the really good pasture and everything, that was one of them that we've been growing corn and soybeans in, just another. And it was supposed to have been it was supposed to have been not tilled. And she ran the numbers, and she said, Tim, are you sure that's never been tilled? Okay. We rutted up the field last fall. We ran a field cultivator over it. She said, I can tell. How could you tell? She said, the protozoa numbers are down. So it's so interesting how one little factor can make a big difference in this. Now here's how I think about it. When you feed dairy cows or beef cows, they have their ruminant and it's full of microorganisms. Are you feeding the cow, or are you feeding those organisms in her stomach, in her rumen? Which one are you feeding? The organisms. Now, I said that one time, a dairy specialist sat there and they raised their hand, and it's not quite true, but it's close enough. For us, what we're talking about, you got to feed those organisms, and they feed the animal. In soil biology, in soils, we feed the soil microorganisms, and they feed the plant. Think about that. The transformations in the soil of the nutrients, the communications with the plant and the microorganisms, the breakdown of the organic matter that feeds it. They're all in connection to one another. So we're really feeding those microorganisms in the plant, in the soil, which feeds the plant. You got to look at it like that. And that's how Dr. Albrecht was thinking, I believe. He realized you got to feed the biology, then that will feed the plant. And annual cover crops are a great way to improve soil biology. I was so excited with this. I started working on cover crops in the late 80s, kind of on the side before they were cool and everything. And I was doing some stuff with them. I told my dad about it. My dad just passed away last year at 102. So he farmed throughout the 30s and on. And he said, yeah, we did that in the 1930s. Well, what? Nothing was really new anymore. We were just revisiting what they had done in the 30s. But after World War II, things changed. Things changed a lot after World War II. But here's something. This is when I should have talked about my mother-in-law in her garden. But we had an organic study. We plowed this pasture over. Man, did that yield good. When you have mass death of your biology, all those nutrients get released, you actually can see it. Oh man, if you want to raise some yield busting, do it right after you plow up a pasture or prairie. You'll get some great yields. And we saw that. We saw that a lot. But we saw it in a research study. I had a colleague at Lincoln University. I have a colleague. And we have this big cover crop study together. And I went down there to visit after they got established. It's a cover crop by vegetable study. And we're looking at perennial cover crops and annual cover crops. And our control is just tilled. All right, there's your just tilled, there's a perennial cover crop. And I was talking to a student, and they said, yeah, really our best yields are where we tilled it. I went, really? Yeah, here it is. Here's where we tilled cucumbers, and here's where we're a perennial cover crop. So, man, that shoots my theories down, doesn't it? So I said, what was this field before you grew vegetables? Pasture. For how long? Oh, 30, 40, 50 years. That explains it, doesn't it? That first year they went out and tilled it, and they had this death of the microorganisms, and that's what's feeding this. I guarantee you, well, this was 2 years, this was 22, wasn't like this past year. So you can see how in a short time you can make a big difference. Here's a study we have. We're looking at rotations. Do we lengthen the rotations out? Does that make a difference? Well, here is continuous corn. I only been continuous corn for 7 or 8 years. Here it is in a 5-year rotation. Looks a lot different, doesn't it? By stretching those rotations out, we've got better soil structure. It doesn't matter if it's tilled or no till. We've got better soil structure, more microorganisms, and we're doing a lot better job in our soil management when we lengthen those rotations out. Here's a cover crop versus the same studies that we have, because we got them split with cover crops. The left is a cover crop, the right is not. You can't tell a lot of difference, but you can. If you got out there, the picture doesn't show it, but it's with the cover crop is about that much taller. It's bushier. Conserving water is what's happening. So you start seeing some of these things happening. And the yield showed this. This is soybean yield that we went from, 39 to 40, 50, upper 40 or 50s and pushing 60 as we lengthened our rotation on that. This year in corn, this year in soybeans, we also had corn, of course. We saw the same thing, a little bit of yields. But as we lengthened our rotations, because we built our soil health up, that we were getting higher yields. And what we found, some people said, well, you can't improve soil health that quick. Oh, yeah, you can. Same studies. 2 years of alfalfa. 2 years. Here's alfalfa for 2 years. Every one of these is higher than what we tilled annually. Every single one of them. So only in 2 years we were able to improve our soil health. So it doesn't take long to start priming that pump and getting things going. So that's biology. How about our chemistry? Well, this is Sanborn Field, heavy tillage. When I took over Sanborn Field from Randy Miles, I said, it's all heavy tillage. I had not plowed since the mid-70s. We quit plowing in the mid-70s. I thought, oh, I was a kid then. I just did what my dad had already, had the plow set. I took off. So I thought, oh my God, people make fun of me when I start plowing and won't have that plow set. I thought, who on this campus has ever plowed before? So it's an art. I got better at it. I'm much better at it. Didn't turn a student loose on it quite yet. But what did we find out from biology at Sanborn Field for when we had no fertility versus full fertility? That means NPK. Unfortunately, we're not in the micronutrients yet at Sanborn Field or sulfur. I'm going to fire my committee so I can do it. They won't let me. And then manure. Look at soil biology, 72 to 90 to 121,000. It makes a difference, even under high intense tillage. Plowed, field cultivated once or twice, so it makes a big difference. Now, I apologize for this. I know this is busy, but I had to show it to you. I had to. We're getting some good data out right now, and I just hot off the press. But I want to show you something. This is continuous corn for 136 years. No fertility manure. Going to biology, it about doubled under heavy tillage. And we see this every time when we've had improvements, whether it's NPK fertility or manures, we get more biology. And we'll talk about a little bit about the other parts of this in just a little bit. But before we get too carried away, think, my God, I got 100,000 weight of soil microorganisms out here. We have a prairie about 20 miles away. It's 345,000. I haven't came close to it yet. Anything I've done, I've ever came close to that. Even restored prairies, we're still 100,000. So when we talk about regenerative agriculture, we're never going to get back to the way the prairies were. We're just not going to. We've lost erosion. We did a study. We did a study on water availability, where we put lots of manures on and improved the carbon. And you think, man, I'm going to show you a picture of it in just a minute. We've got some great soil here, and we do. But compare that to what to our prairie there at Sanborn Field that we haven't did anything to, just had cool season grass on it. We lost 1.5 inches of water, available water. You give me 1.5 inches more water in the middle of the summer, it's a lot. So even all the carbon that we could put on that field, we still are less 1.5 inches of water in the top, what, 1.5 feet or so. So, but what about the Arbor system? What about it? I showed you some data on this. So we have our control, and this is why I split it with some cover crops, and we had our recommendations, and we threw that magnesium on. You remember that magnesium, that sulfur gave us some yield improvement, but didn't do us our soils as much good. So here's our total microbiology. We're 100,000 here with controls, almost 110,000. It's just a couple of years we improved it. But then when we put all the magnesium on it, we actually went down past our control. Our physical properties started changing, didn't they? So we lost some. Now, when we had a cover crop on this, we went up to 120,000, 119,000 just in our controls. 124 where we had our recommendations, still more, still a bit more, but we narrowed that gap because we had that biology source. But even with magnesium, even with all this magnesium on it, and our soil structure, having that biology factor made a difference. Having that cover crop made a big difference. So we can really control our biology with is how we do our fertility, and like cover crops. Or I'm going to show you here in a little bit. Your barley is probably really good. You may want to keep that in your rotation. Now, the soil aggregate, that's our physical property. And when we talk about flocculation, when we had those particles that the water could go down, when we had good aggregate stability, that's where we want to go to. Because our aggregate is made up of our mineral portion of this, held together by what? Our calcium, right? But it's also held together by our fungal hyphae, this bacterial ooze, this microbial glue, and our organic matter. It's all holding this aggregate together. And if we're missing some of that, we're not going to have good aggregates. We have small aggregates, and they're going to be very brittle. They're not going to be stabilized. That video I showed you yesterday makes a big difference. Here's a electron microscope of aggregate, the 3-dimensional. You can see that. Isn't that neat? You see how all these particles of soil are put together. And it's got all these pores in it. Because if you go back, you see these pores. They're so important for water and aeration. And you can actually see them in an actual aggregate. That is pretty neat that you can see all of that. But that's what we want to keep going. So in aggregate stability, that's one of our physical properties. The higher it is, the better. Let's go back to that picture of that longer rotation. With 34% continuous corn, it's got all the fertility at once. Everything else at once. Spread that out. We got 54%. Why? Soil biology went up. We start improving one. We improve the biology. We can improve our physical properties. That becomes extremely important. How are aggregates formed? Well, they're formed, like I said, from bacteria and fungi. You got the chemical part of it, and they make small aggregates, and then they get bigger aggregates formed from that. They keep getting bigger and bigger if they have the right tools to do it. So they start getting together, and if they have the right chemistry, the right biology, they're fairly resilient. And just another building blocks of it. It goes from our plant residues to our minerals, our root hairs. A lot of things get involved in this to build these aggregates together that we saw a while ago. And this is what we showed earlier, how cations, your calciums, and your magnesiums too, can actually help build these all together. But one thing that's important is the big turnover of these. These are constantly being broken down and built back because in biology are working on them. Here's a example of our rotation, that when we have our active carbon and our aggregate stability are all related. As you improve the active carbon, remember this is the biology that the carbon that the biology can use. As it improves, yields go up, as well as aggregate stability. They're all fairly related to one another. So you start getting all these factors of soil health, and they all relate back to one another, and you can tie them all together. Now, I mentioned they're constantly being broken down and rebuilt. So if in your rotation, you have a crop that doesn't rebuild very well, what's going to happen? Structure is going to go down. Remember I said something earlier about 40% of all the carbon produced in the leaves goes out the root? And it's in organic type compounds. Paul mentioned that, in all different kind of compounds, depending on what the plant and the microorganisms want to do. Not all plants are the same. And here's how the data. They can release phenolic compounds. This is a phenolic compound right here. I remember having that on a test one day. It's a benzene ring with OH on it. But corn produces a lot of phenolics out in the roots, out in the root zone. Phenolic compounds are turned into humic acids, which actually helps glue the aggregates together. Oats, pretty good too. Wheat is really good. Alfalfa, not as good. Soybeans aren't very good at all. When I get soil health tests back from either this long-term studies that we got all the different crops growing, or Sanborn field, I can pick out wheat, corn, soybean without looking at what they really are. Wheat's the best structure we got. Corn's the next, and it drops significantly down to soybeans. And we see this in June. Soybeans are planted like a month, and we already have saw our structure starting to fall apart. Because soybeans, and this is new. This is brand new that Bob Kramer and I, who's the father of modern soil health, and I have just started putting together. We use other people's data that we saw and start putting this together, that maybe that's why soybeans, our structure is so bad. The Sanborn field, our very worst soil is continuous soybeans, our very worst by far. Yes, sir. Grass? I was kind of surprised it was right here. I really was. But that's prairie grass. Now, and the reason I think it's as low as it is it doesn't grow for several months. Where I'm at, our cool season grasses will stay green until you get in the middle of the winter. So they're longer, and what we're finding is our better soil structure are under them. They are prairie grasses, because crops that green up faster and stay longer in the fall are going to have better structure because of that. Because remember, they're still pumping compounds out to the roots.
Is that because the native prairie grasses are warm season?
Yes, because they're warm season, and they turn off a little quick, don't they? And they start up late. So that's why even with our prairie grasses, having a mix of some cool season grasses, we have some native cool season grasses, or even our forbs, makes a big difference. Oh, back when Jerry Clapperton was here, our best soils were our fence rows, because there was so much difference out there. There was so much different variety. And then it wasn't our warm season grass, it was our cool season grasses. Oh, that people didn't like hearing that, but that's how it went. I've forgotten about that. But then they were still better than our row crops. So how does this relate back to our calcium magnesium balance? Let's take a look. Okay, Sanborn field again. We knew we increased our biology. Boom, boom, boom. Look at our aggregate stability. It went up too. So we improved our physical properties and our biology with chemistry. So see how they could be how they are related to one another. So here's a quiz. I was standing between two plots. One was same rotations since 1888. One was full of fertilizer. One was manure only. Which one's fertilizer and which one's manure only? Don't go by the color because the sun was was kind of messing with me a little bit. Look at the leaves. Look at the leaves. Oh shoot! Good, that didn't give it away. Look at these leaves right here. This is a warm day in Missouri, about 11 o'clock in the morning. To these, what do you notice? What's that corn doing? It's growing up, isn't it? It's got all the NPK that it wants. What's that manure doing? It's not curling up, is it? It still has all the, well, it didn't have quite enough in. That's one thing that's really came out with this new data that we're showing. But it's got all the PK and micros and organic matter that it wants. It's got more water holding capacity. That soil can hold more water than this one can. That's the only difference. Higher carbon than this one. This has aggregate stability about 12. This has 129. That's the difference right there. As we discussed, though, manures don't have everything you need. You got to watch what you're putting in and what your soil tests are, because you may still have to supplement something. Now, so let's go back to our Arbrick study that we did. Where are we at? Okay, control recommendations with magnesium. Active carbon, that's what's important. That's what the microbes are feeding on. It goes up some, but look at aggregate stability. 15, recommendations 21, down to 15 when we had our magnesium. The structure was messed up, wasn't it? We messed the structure up by putting so much magnesium on it that we lost, that we wiped out having all of our good stuff, even with our biology, because of that. But look, when we did have a cover crop, we improved it back up to where the recommendations were. So you could overcome some of that structure issues with better biology. So they can compensate for one or the other to a certain point. So, because remember, as you increase we have a calcitic soil versus high magnesium makes a difference on water infiltration. So that had a lot to do with that. Also, this is how they all relate together now. Remember how the chemistry, biology, and physical properties are all interrelated, as it's shown right here. So here's a we got two crops. Now, which is better, wheat or corn, you think? What do you think has the better soil structure? Continuous wheat or continuous corn? Wheat, you're right. Look here. This is, my fingers don't fit this. This is continuous corn. No fertility, full fertility, 6 tons of manure every year. 6 tons. Here's continuous wheat. It's with no fertility is better than 6 tons corn, or at least equal to it, if not a little bit better. Why? Why is the wheat so much better? Well, I think it's those compounds we talked about, but it's greener all year. All fall is green. All early in the spring it greens up. It's green up well into the summer. We have something green and growing there 10 months a year versus 4 to 5. And that makes a difference on our biology, and that makes a difference on our structure right there. Remember back when we said In a dry year, that's when we really see our differences in fertility changing, because that's when we can really start seeing some of these structural issues come in. So conclusion is soil health are changed by the Albrecht system. They are, but it's biology. We get more microorganisms. Chemistry, we get better calcium. We get our calcium right. We don't have too much of something negative like magnesium or sodium. And we equal greater physical properties, but they're all related. And not necessarily have to be the Albrecht system. Any type of system that you meet your requirements will give you this type of response. So now, healthy soil health, does that lead to healthy people and animals? Does it? Well, let's see. 1945. February, I think it's September issue of 45. Saturday Evening Post. They did a story. Dr. Albrecht said, we're starving ourselves to death. Because then he recognized that even in 1945, we're missing the nutrients in our plant, in our soils, which equal missing in our plants and into us. Here's a copy of that. If anybody wants it, you can have it. It's right up here. Or I can send it to Jeremiah, the PDF. I got that PDF. I bought the magazine so I could have it. But he was talking about that, and he was showing that, yeah, when you don't have the good fertility, like you see on your left, you're not going to get good plant growth or the nutrients in the plant, and you're not going to get, your livestock's not going to be well, and we're not going to be well. It makes a big difference. And they just put this together in the 1940s. So he started working on this in the 40s and in the 50s. And he started out, look at the cattle, and the vet school got mad at him because he was intruding on their animals. So he said, okay, I'll just use rabbits instead. Plus they're easier to turn over. So here is rabbits one was fed a diet from a fertilized pasture grass. The one wasn't. Not only look at the rabbit, physically looks different, but look at his bones. Totally different look. So this was really important, showing how the fertility affected the plant and the plant affected the animal right there. But he also did this with people too. That data's out there. It's so neat to dig through data and find something neat. And when you put this when I saw this next, I thought of you. I thought, I know that. That's been around since the 40s. But what he did, go back a little bit, he took the dental records of the Navy draftees for World War II. When you went through there, they looked at your mouth, counted how many cavities you had, how many fillings you had. Back in those days, in the 1940s, you pretty well ate locally, didn't you? You didn't import stuff from all over the country or from Mexico or whatever. You were what you were raised on. And he said, from this, maybe we can draw some conclusions. So here it is. He found that, of course, as we move from east to west, what happens to our calcium and phosphate levels? Go up, don't they? What happened to the number of cavities and fillings as we went from east to west? They went down. A correlation between the available calcium and phosphorus in our teeth from people that were eating food from their area. Pretty good correlations. But if you're paying attention yesterday, you answer this question. You get about right where we're at now. It started going back up. Look at that. Middle of Kansas, you get to where you live, it went back up. Why? Don't you have lots of calcium in your soil? What else do you have a lot of? Is all that calcium available? It's precipitated with phosphates, a lot of it. You talked about calcium phosphates. I think what you're seeing here is once you got out in this area, you wouldn't get as much calcium in your diet as they were back east, a little bit further east, and the number of cavities started going back up. That's pretty interesting. How it was very good correlation between the soils and our own body. Because what are our teeth made out of? Bone, calcium, phosphorus, right? That's very good correlation. And worn out soils out east. This is North Carolina, and I've got the original photo. I found this in Dr. Arbrick's files the other day. I was so excited. But this little girl has rickets. And these old wore out soils of the Carolinas, just not putting anything back. Now they've got diseases in the children, which was so common. So let's connect some of our Sanborn field stuff. I took some wheat that we got here, it was 2 years ago, and I looked at the calcium of the soil test. We ran the proteins on it, and I looked at the soil health on it here. Well, what jumped out at me was these plots here were lower in magnesium. That wheat was lower in protein levels. Makes sense, doesn't it? Lower it was in the cutoff about 10%. We had magnesium deficiency. Even though I couldn't tell the photosynthesis, these are pretty high productive plots. I couldn't tell the photosynthesis was down, but it was down. Lower photosynthesis, not as much grain filling, not as much nitrogen going into the grain because it had all it wanted, lower crude protein. Then we look over here, our aggregates are down because we don't have a good of a soil over here because we're missing magnesium, that we're too low. Plants our organic matter is lower, so it's showing up over here. So how it's all connected right here. I thought that was really, really neat. And I'm trying to get our food scientists to take this to the next step. Let's take this grain and let's find out what is available to us. Because knowing what's in it's one thing, but what's available to us is the next step. And you remember I talked about here how they can be related to one another. So we got this. So we took this from the laboratory to the greenhouse to the field. It was working. We took it one more step to the animals themselves. So animal studies are expensive. You can't do big animal studies. And, you make a mistake on an animal, you kill it. Ugh, plant, oh well, So you got to watch that too. So here's blood. This is blood serum of lactating cows. Grass tetany, we did this in the spring. Control, no P fertilizer, just what the most of the tall fescue in the spring in Missouri is. Us in the worst fertility you'd ever see. Here's the mag levels, the calcium, the potassium, and the P. We give them a mineral block. That's what they always said. You gotta get a mineral block, and it works. The mag levels go up. No P fertilizer, but they got the magnesium, and so the blood serum goes up. But no mineral block. We just gave a little bit of phosphate fertilizer. Just a normal 4 to 8 year build up. Nothing special. So that's all we put on. Nothing special. Mag goes up in the blood serum. And phosphate went up, and so did the mag. That shows you how important the fertility is to the plant and then to the animal. I think we should all just get some blood right now and analyze it. We'll see what happens. But that was really eye-opening right there. So let's go more into biology. Now, as we're finding out, there's a lot going on in the human. And they are finding now that a lot of what's in the soil is winding up, these compounds are winding up in the plant, and then that winds up into our food system. So we are a lot what we eat. We really are. But have you ever heard of David Montgomery? He wrote the book Dirt. Oh, you should read that book. You'll never look at soil the same way. You ever read it, Paul? You haven't? Oh man, you got to read the book Dirt. And he's a geologist. And he wrote the history of mankind that can be traced back to abusing the soil. Most civilizations last 200 years. Because by that time you wear the soil out and it crashes. You can go back all the way to Mesopotamia the same way. You destroy the soil, you destroy civilization. Across the river from St. Louis is the Cahokia Mountains. They had 100,000 people in there in 1200. By 1250, they were gone. Why? They wore the soil out. It was the largest at the time in North America city there was, but they wore the soil out. It didn't last long. So it makes a big difference. So David Montgomery got with Ray Archuleta. You've heard of Ray Archuleta, NRC? Where's the NRCS guy? You know who he is, don't you? He's the one that really opened folks' eyes up. He was very articulate and got people to really be thinking about this. So they combined together with some more folks, and they did some studies all over the United States, not too far from here, as a matter of fact. But they looked at this, and they compared what they were calling regenerative, using cover crops, so try to make your soil health as best as possible versus what's normal for the area. And they looked at the plants as well as the animals. So the very first thing you want to look at, here's some soil, organic matter. With the regenerative, you get more soil organic matter. The Haney test, I heard that word earlier. Haney test is also better. So they were seeing an increase in these soil health factors. We probably figured that already, but that's great. But then you start looking at the wheat crop that came off some of these. Here's a regenerative with the cover crop numbers. Here's the no cover crop or the conventional. They got more. I'm kind of surprised at this, actually. I didn't think it happened that quick. They didn't give the details of how long they've been in cover crops, but they were making more micronutrients and macronutrients in the wheat seed. Pretty neat. So now better biology or better soil health is giving us better seed nutrients. Now, how about the animal? Omega-3s are good, right? We want more omega-3s. They say if you hit, like fish has lots of omega-3s in it, that's why you're healthier. But most of our meats are omega-6s, high omega-6. So they fed this grain and forage of this to the animals. So regenerative. Well, let's look at conventional first. 0.0358 omega-3s, grams per 100 gram. Regenerative, 0.1, almost three times more. Less omega-6s, we still got some because we need some. And then the ratio is better. So by going better soil health is also giving them a higher quality of the livestock that they're feeding on. So our conclusions are these all are connected together, the soil health. You improve one, you can improve the other ones. And it's also connecting back to improve our soil health. The data is there. You can improve the plant and you can also improve the animal. We're pulling, just like Paul and I were talking, there's data out there that we just got pulled out. It's actually showing all these connections. So do I have any questions? I want to get another plug to myself there. And also go to Missouri, Mo Space, and you can find any article that was ever published by the University of Missouri people. All Dr. Albrecht stuff's there, Hans Jenny's stuff's there, anybody, my stuff's there, anybody's stuff, publications are there. So I encourage you, it's easy to find. You can download them and read them. Most of the data from a long time ago wound up in our Ag Experiment Station bulletins. It wasn't published in refereed journals. Those things are chock full of fantastic data. I love looking at those. So any questions? Oh, man. Y'all have been bored. Oh, there's one.
What was the author of that book that you?
David Montgomery, Dirt. It's a really good book. And then he wrote another book called The Rocks Don't Lie. It's pretty interesting too. It talks about some of the basins around here. Those that you talk about when you start talking about those lakes that broke and scoured things out. He talked about that in that book, The Rocks Don't Lie. It's really interesting. And he's even getting the soil health now too a bit more in some other books. All right.
Any questions? Other questions? Micah, any online?
Oh man.
Well, you're not over. We gotta produce. We're gonna pull you back up here and have
Okay.
Q&A. So
All right.
you're not off the hook yet.
And somebody had it. They wanted.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tim. We'll get Rory up here now.